Welcome to the unit on data collection, types of data. The objectives for this session are to define quantitative data, qualitative data, discrete data, continuous data, and group data, and also apply the above definitions to examples. Let's begin with some definitions. Suppose we have data. The data might be of two types, either quantitative, which is also denoted as numeric or variable, or qualitative, which is also known as non-numeric, attribute, or categorical. Quantitative data is divided again into two. Either discrete data, in other words, data which has been expressed precisely or can be expressed precisely, such as the number of hats in a box or the number of people in a room, etc. These values always take on whole values or concrete values which you can't take to extra degrees of accuracy. Quantitative data can also be continuous. This is data which can take any value in a given range. So, for example, weight could be 3 kg or 3.2 kg or 3.24 kg, etc. We can take it to more and more degrees of accuracy if we wish to do so. This is something we can't do with discrete data. And now for the qualitative data. This is also divided into two. The first category is ordinal. This is data which has a natural ordering. So, for example, exam grades, we have grade A, B, C, D, and so on. There is an ordering to it, even though it's not numerical. And then we have nominal data. This is data which has no implicit ordering whatsoever. So, for example, the colour of a car. It could take the colour blue, green, red, and so on. However, there's no ordering within this. So here's a summary of the key points. Quantitative data is essentially numeric data. It could either be discrete, which is data which can be expressed exactly, or continuous, which is data which can take any value in a given range. Then we have qualitative data. This can be either ordinal. This is data with some kind of natural ordering, but which is not numeric, or it could be nominal data. And nominal data is, of course, data with no implicit ordering at all. Now, large amounts of data can be displayed as a frequency table or as group data. The specific values are not shown in these tables. Class boundaries are the upper and lower values of a class that mark common points between the classes. You can think of this in terms of, say, countries, where a boundary between two countries will denote some kind of common point between the two, or where you transition from one to the other. Then we have the midpoint, which is the average of the class boundaries, and also the class width, which is the difference between the upper and lower class boundaries. Let's now have a go at an example to illustrate these definitions. The time taken in minutes to the closest minute to type a document by several individuals is recorded in the following table. we are required to state whether time is quantitative or qualitative, and also whether it is discrete or continuous. In addition, we are required to write down the class boundaries, midpoint, and class widths for all the classes. This example will help us to understand the definitions that we've just looked at. So let's remind ourselves of quantitative and qualitative data again. Remember, quantitative data was numeric and qualitative data was non-numeric. So of course, when we're asked whether time is quantitative or qualitative, it is clearly quantitative. And now let's ask ourselves whether time is discrete or continuous. Remember, discrete data is data which can be expressed precisely, so you can't take it to extra degrees of accuracy, whereas continuous data is data which can take any value in a given range. And therefore, because time can be taken to extra degrees of accuracy, time is therefore continuous. And now for part B. Write down the class boundaries, midpoint, and class widths for all the classes. Let's first look at class boundaries. These are the upper and lower values of a class that mark common points between classes. So notice the first class, it goes from 5 to 9. The lower boundary is therefore 4.5, and the upper boundary is 9.5. In the 10 to 14 class, the lower boundary is 9.5 and the upper boundary is 14.5. And finally, for the last class, 15 to 19, the lower boundary is 14.5 and the upper boundary is 19.5. The midpoint is the average of the class boundaries. So for the first class, we add the boundaries and divide by 2 to give us the midpoint, which is 7. And for the second class, again, adding the boundaries and dividing by 2 to give us 12. And finally, for the third class, adding the boundaries and dividing by 2 gives us 17. And now for the class widths. The class width is the difference between the upper and lower class boundaries. So for the first class, it's 9.5 minus 4.5, which is 5. For the second class, 14.5 minus 9.5, which is equal to 5. And for the third class, it's 19.5 minus 14.5, which is equal to 5. So here's a summary of our results. This brings us to the end of this session. If you have understood its contents, you should be able to define quantitative data, qualitative data, discrete data, continuous data, and group data. You should also be able to apply the above definitions to examples. Thank you very much for listening. To understand this topic in greater depth, do attempt the exercises in your textbook related to this topic.